Dear students, in this session we are going to discuss about document object model in JavaScript. That is DOM. DOM stands for document object model in JavaScript. Let us start this session with what is DOM. HTML DOM. HTML DOM means HTML document object model. So when a web page is loaded, the browser creates a document object model of the page. So we normally, a web page means it is an HTML document. Whenever an HTML document is loaded, the browser creates a corresponding document object model of that page. The document object model is constructed as a tree of objects. The DOM provides an application programming interface that exposes the entirety of a web page, including tags, attributes, style, and content to a programming language such as JavaScript. DOM is described as in different levels, and it describes the architecture of a web page in the form of a tree. It is considered as a tree of objects. Look at the diagram. In this diagram, we can see that there will be a tree. All the elements in a particular HTML document are arranged in the form of a tree, where document is the root of the corresponding tree. The root element should be considered as the HTML element. The HTML element is having two children, head element and body element. If you look at the head element, again it is having a child called title element, which is containing a text, my title. That is the left child of the root element. Now we see the right child. The right child of the corresponding tree is element body. Here the element body is having two children, element A and element H1, where element A is mentioned, or it is having two subdivisions. One is attribute which contains the attribute href. Href always takes the URI of the corresponding anchor. Then comes the text means what content the link is to be placed, that is mentioned in the text. Then next child of body tag or body element is h1 element, which contains a simple text, my header. So in document object model, all the HTML elements are constructed, or it will be treated as objects, and it should be arranged in the form of a tree. When a browser reads a particular HTML document, it represents the document in the form of a tree, like this, a tree of objects. The HTML DOM. With the object model, JavaScript gets all the power it needs to create dynamic HTML. Dynamic HTML means the contents of a dynamic HTML page changes. So with this corresponding document object model, this JavaScript gets all the power it needs to create the corresponding dynamic HTML. JavaScript can change all the HTML elements in the page. So JavaScript is able to make changes in the corresponding HTML elements or HTML tags on a web page. JavaScript can change all the HTML attributes in the page. This JavaScript is responsible for making changes in the attributes of corresponding HTML components. JavaScript can change all the CSS styles in the page. So this JavaScript is able to do changes in the style formatting of components in a web page. JavaScript can remove existing HTML elements and attributes. So it is responsible for removing or deleting existing HTML elements and its attributes. JavaScript can add new HTML elements and attributes. So it is also responsible for adding new HTML elements and attributes. JavaScript can react to all existing HTML events in the page. We already discussed about the different types of events that can occur on a web page, like on submit, on click, then on load, on unload, on mouse over, on mouse out, on double click, likewise. So this JavaScript code can react to all the type of events in a web page. JavaScript can create new HTML events in the page. From the JavaScript code itself, we can create new HTML events. So, as a nutshell, we can see that JavaScript is responsible for changing the HTML elements as well as changing the HTML attributes, and it is also responsible for changing the CSS styles in a web page, and it is responsible for adding or deleting HTML elements and its attributes, and it can be react to all the existing HTML events in a web page, and it is also responsible for adding new HTML events in the web page. Let us see what is DOM, Document Object Model. The DOM is a W3C standard. W3 stands for World Wide Web Consortium. W3C stands for World Wide Web Consortium. The DOM defines a standard for accessing documents. So this DOM is responsible for defining a standard, which is the standard is mentioning for accessing the documents. As per the definition of W3C, DOM can be defined as the W3C document object model is a platform and language neutral interface that allows programs and scripts to dynamically access and update the content, structure, and style of a document. So this is the definition which is mentioned by W3C, that is World Wide Web Consortium. Document Object Model is a platform and language, or it can be termed as a neutral interface that allows programs and scripts to dynamically access and update the content, structure, and style of a document. As per this W3C consortium, DOM standard is separated into three different parts: Core DOM, XML DOM, HTML DOM. Core DOM means it is a standard model for all document types. So this Core DOM is the standard for all the document type data. Then XML DOM, it's a standard model for XML documents. Then HTML DOM is a standard model for HTML documents. The HTML DOM is a standard object model and programming interface for HTML. We are mainly concentrating on the HTML DOM. This HTML DOM is a standard object model and it is a programming interface, or that standard is used for creating the HTML. So it defines the HTML elements as objects, the properties of all HTML elements, the methods to access all HTML elements, the events for all HTML elements. So inside the HTML DOM standard, it specifies or it defines the HTML elements as objects. So it treats every HTML element as an object. It also defines the properties of all HTML elements. Then the methods to access all HTML elements and the events that are associated with the HTML elements. In other words, we can say that the HTML DOM is a standard for how to get, change, add or delete HTML elements. how to get, how to change, how to add, or and how to delete HTML elements. So HTML DOM means HTML document object model. So whenever a web page is loaded, the corresponding document object model is created. Document object model means it treats all the elements in the web page in the form of a tree, and it's considered as a tree of objects. So what all things this DOM can do? DOM is actually a standard which is defined by the World Wide Web Consortium, W3C Consortium, and inside the HTML DOM it defines what all HTML elements, or it treats HTML elements as objects. It specifies the properties of all HTML elements, the methods to access all the HTML elements, the events for all HTML elements. That is, this HTML DOM is a standard for how to get, how to change, how to add, and how to delete HTML elements. Let us see some of the HTML DOM methods. HTML DOM methods are actions you can perform on HTML elements. So by the name, HTML DOM elements means these are some functions that we can perform with HTML elements. HTML DOM properties are values of HTML elements that you can set or change. So HTML DOM methods means these are functions or actions that can be performed with the different HTML elements. Then HTML DOM properties are values that can change or set. The DOM programming interface. The HTML DOM can be accessed with JavaScript. In the DOM, all HTML elements are defined as objects. The programming interface is the properties and methods of each object. A property is a value that you can get or set, like changing the content of an HTML element. A method is an action you can do, like add or deleting an HTML element. So whenever a web page is loaded, the corresponding DOM is created, and DOM is created in the format of a tree. The HTML DOM can be accessed using this JavaScript scripting language. And then in the DOM, all the HTML elements are treated as objects because it is considered as a tree of, in the DOM, it is considered as a tree of objects. So all the HTML elements are in the format of objects. The programming interface is the properties and methods of each object. So the programming interface is treated as the properties and methods that mentioned for each object. Property means the value that you set or you can get from a particular HTML element, and method means it's an action you can do, like adding or deleting an HTML element. Now we see some of the basic HTML DOM methods. Get element by ID method. The first method is get element by ID. When moving around the HTML document tree, we can either start at the top of the tree or start at the element of your choice. We will start with directly accessing an element since the process is fairly easy to understand. So in such a situation, we can use this document dot get element by ID method. So the most common way to access an HTML element is to use the ID of the element. So the get element by ID method used ID is equal to demo to find the element. So it will take the get element by ID is a method which is used to take the ID, or which takes the value ID of a particular HTML element, so that that particular HTML element can be easily retrieved or easily identified. The next is inner HTML property. It is easiest way to get the content of an element by using the inner HTML property. If we want to know what is the content that is present inside a particular HTML element, we have to use this inner HTML property. The inner HTML property is useful for getting or replacing the contents of HTML elements. So get element by ID method, it is the common way to access an HTML element by giving the ID of the element. And inner HTML property or this function is used for getting or replacing the contents of an HTML element. Now we can see some of the common HTML elements are the corresponding HTML DOM methods. The document object represents your web page. If you want to access any element in an HTML page, you always start with accessing the document object. If you want to access any of the component in an HTML page, we have to start accessing the object with the help of DOM. These are some of the example methods where how we can take or how we can access an object and manipulate the HTML. For finding the HTML elements, some methods are given and its description was also mentioned. First is document.getElement by ID. It takes always an ID value. So this function or this method is used for finding an element by its ID. Element ID. Finding an element by element ID. The next property is document.getElements by tag name. This function takes a name as argument and it finds elements by the corresponding tag name mentioned as argument. The next is document.getElements by class name. The argument is a name, so it finds the elements by corresponding class name. Now we see some of the HTML changing HTML elements, some of the methods which are used for changing HTML elements. Element.innerHTML. Element.innerHTML is equal to new HTML content. So this method is responsible for changing the inner HTML of an element. Then element.attribute is equal to new value. So this method is responsible for changing the attribute value of an HTML element. Element.setAttribute comma value. So this function is used for changing the attribute value of an HTML element. Then element.style.property is equal to new style. This method is responsible for changing the style of an HTML element. So the different methods which are used for changing the HTML elements are element.innerHTML, element.attribute, element.setAttribute, element.style.property. Now we can see how we can add and delete elements in the DOM. Document.createElement with argument element. So this method is responsible for creating an HTML element. Another function is document.removeChild.element. So it is responsible for removing an HTML element. Next function is document.appendChildElement. This method is responsible for adding an HTML element. Then document.replaceChildOfElement. This function is responsible for replacing an HTML element. The next is document.writeOfText. So this function is used for writing into the HTML output stream. So these are some of the most common methods which are responsible for adding and deleting elements in the DOM model, or using JavaScript how we can add and delete elements. Document.createElement, document.removeChild, document.appendChild, document.replaceChild, document.write. In this we can see the different HTML object and its properties. Document.property, first property document.anchors. It returns all A elements that have a name attribute. So if you are using document.anchors, what happens is it will return all the anchor tags in the corresponding web page which is having a name attribute. Next property is document.applets. Returns all applet elements. So we can say that while we are running applets in Java, we have to embed a tag applet in the corresponding Java code. So if such type of web page, if a web page is containing a Java applet application, this function document.applets function is responsible for returning all the applet elements which are defined in the corresponding web page. Then document.base URI. It returns the absolute base URI of the document. Then document.body. It returns the body element. Document.cookie. It returns the document's cookie. Document.doctype. It returns the document's document type. Document.document element. This function returns the HTML element. Document.document mode. It returns the mode used by the browser. Document.document URI. It returns the URI of the document. Document.domain. It returns the domain name of the document server. Then document.dom.config. It is obsolete and returns the DOM configuration. And document.embeds. It returns all the embed elements in the corresponding web page. These are some of the properties associated with DOM model. Some more properties are there. Document.forms. It returns all the form elements in the web page. Document.head. It returns the head element. Document.images. It returns all the image elements in the web page. Document.implementation. It returns the DOM implementation. Document.input encoding. It returns the document's encoding character set. Document.last modified. It returns the date and time the document was updated. Document.links. It returns all area and A elements that have a href attribute. Document.ready state. It returns the loading status of the document. Document.referrer. It returns the URI of the referrer or the URI of the linking document. Document.scripts. It returns all the script elements in the web page. Document.strict error checking. This function returns if error checking is enforced. Document.title. It returns the title element. Document.url. It returns the complete URL of the document.web page. Now we can see how we can find the HTML elements. We can find HTML elements by several identities. We can find the HTML elements by ID. We can find the HTML elements by tag name. We can find the HTML elements by class name. We can find the HTML elements by CSS selectors. And we can find HTML elements by HTML object collections. So by using ID or tag name or class name or CSS selectors or by HTML object collection, we can find the different HTML elements. Finding HTML element by ID. I already mentioned about get element by ID. So it is one of the easiest method to find out an HTML element. The easiest way to find an HTML element in the DOM is by using the element ID. Variable my element is equal to document.getElementById intro. So this function will return all the elements which is having the ID intro, and that elements are stored in the my element variable. Let us see an example which finds the HTML elements by tag name. This example finds all P elements. So here we are having a variable x. Variable x is equal to document.getElements by tag name of P. So this means that document.getElements by tag name of P means by the tag P tag we are going to access some elements. So in this example we are having the HTML tag, then comes the body tag. Inside the body tag a P tag is mentioned which contains the text hello world. Then another P tag is there. The DOM is very useful, that is the text in the second P tag. The third P tag, this example demonstrates the get elements by tag name method, that is the third paragraph element. Then fourth paragraph element which is having an ID is equal to demo, which contains now text and the paragraph tag is closed. Then comes the script. Inside the script tag, a variable x is declared. Variable x is equal to document.getElements by tag name of P. So here what happens is we are using the tag P. By the tag P, we are trying to access the data in tag P. That data is stored in a variable called x. So document.getElementById demo.innerHTML. So we are trying to place content to the demo. Get element by ID means this method is used to refer or to mention the corresponding demo. Demo is actually an ID, so which is used. So get element by ID of demo means we are trying to identify an element with the ID demo. Dot inner HTML. Inner HTML is a method which is used to specify the value in a particular HTML element. So we are trying to place the value of demo is equal to the first paragraph index of 0 is x of 0 dot inner HTML. So what is x? X means x is actually assigned with the value or assigned with the tag name P. So here what happens is we are having 4 P tag. 3 of the P tags are having no particular ID and 4th P tag is having an ID called demo. So here what happens is we are trying to place a new content to the ID demo. So here ID demo is used with paragraph tag. So we are trying to place a text in the corresponding paragraph, and the text is like this. The first paragraph index of 0 is then x of 0 dot inner HTML. Now we can have a look at x of 0. X of 0 here indicates that x mentions to the tag name P, but x of 0 means actually paragraph tag is used 4 times in this particular document. So x of 0 mentions to the text in the first paragraph tag. So here it is x of 0 dot inner HTML means x of 0 mentions to this particular paragraph and its inner HTML. So its inner value is hello world. So what is printed inside the paragraph ID demo is equal to the first paragraph index of 0 is hello world. You can see here. The first paragraph is mentioned as hello world. Second is the DOM is very useful. Third thing is the example demonstrates the get elements by tag name method. And the next is inside the script what it is executed is the first paragraph index of 0 is hello world. So here what happens here it is, first of all it mentions the first paragraph, second paragraph, third paragraph and fourth paragraph. Fourth paragraph is not having any text, but it is referred by an ID value. The ID name is demo. Then inside the script what it is happening is script uses the method get elements by tag name. So it uses get elements by tag name. The tag here used is p tag. So what happens is all the data, all the matter related to p tag is assigned to variable x. Now the next statement is document.get element by id of demo.inner html. That means we are trying to place a new text or new content or a new value towards the ID demo. ID demo is used with paragraph tag. So the content is this. The first paragraph index of 0 is x of 0 dot inner html. Here x of 0 mentions to the first paragraph tag. So first paragraph tag dot inner html. So the text or value in the first paragraph tag is hello world. So our output will be like this. The first paragraph index of 0 is hello world. So this is an example for get elements by tag name. Get elements by tag name. Also it mentions the method get element by id. Get element by id. The next example is finding HTML elements by class name. In the previous example, we get the element by tag name. Here we are using a class name. If you want to find all HTML elements with the same class name, use get elements by class name. This example returns a list of all elements with classes equal to intro. So here we are having an example. The example is almost similar as that of previous. Now we can see what is happening in the example. An HTML page with the body, then the first paragraph tag contains the data hello world, then second paragraph which is having a class, that the name of the class is intro, which contains a simple statement. The DOM is very useful. Then third paragraph class is equal to intro. Third paragraph class is also mentioned as intro. This example demonstrates the get elements by class name method. Then third paragraph is closed. Fourth paragraph PID equal to demo. Then it is closed. Nothing is specified as text in the fourth paragraph. Then we are having a script tag. Variable x is equal to document.get element by class name intro. So here in the previous example we are using get element by tag name, but here it is using get elements by class name. Here the class name used is intro. The next is document.get element by id. Get element by id demo.inner html. So here also the same as that of previous, we are trying to place new data or new value towards the corresponding id demo. We are having the fourth paragraph is having the id demo. So for the fourth paragraph we are trying to place new data or new value. The value is this. The first paragraph index of 0 with class is equal to intro x of 0 dot inner html. So here what happens is this text is printed. The first paragraph index of 0 with class is equal to intro is equal to x of 0 dot inner html. Now we have to consider what is x of 0. Here x of variable x is assigned with value document dot get elements by class name of intro. Get elements by class name of intro. So what happens here it is all the classes with name intro will be assigned to variable x. So we are having a look at the corresponding intro classes. So this is the first intro class which contains the text. The DOM is very useful. Then second intro is this example demonstrates the get elements by class name method. So only two intro classes are there. Here we are using x of 0 dot inner HTML. So x of 0 mentions to this particular statement, the DOM is very useful. So our fourth paragraph contains the data. The first paragraph, index of 0 with class is equal to intro. The DOM is very useful. So this is the output. Hello world is printed likewise. Then the second is the DOM is very useful. That is here. Then next is this example demonstrates in bold letters get elements by class name method. That is here. This example demonstrates this. Then fourth paragraph is having nothing. But using this script, we are trying to access the first intro data except 0.inner HTML. Here what we are doing is document.get element by class name of intro. So here what happens is intro class name is assigned. Intro, all the data related to class intro is assigned to variable x. Then what we are doing is the next statement we are trying to assign data to id demo. The data is the first paragraph index of 0 with class is equal to intro x of 0 dot inner HTML. Here x of 0 mentions to first intro. So the data is the DOM is very useful. Hope you understood this concept. Get elements by class name. Get elements by class name. So in the previous examples we seen about get elements by tag name, get elements by class name. Now we can see some more methods. Finding HTML elements by CSS selectors. If you want to find all HTML elements that matches a specified CSS selector, use the query selector all method. So here what happens is, if you want to find all HTML elements that matches a specified CSS selector, we know that inside a CSS selector, CSS selector is normally assigned with value and HTML tag. So inside the tag we can specify, for a CSS selector we can assign IDs, class name, then we can specify the type, attributes, value of the corresponding attributes, property value pairs. For selecting all this we have to use a method called query selector all method. Query selector all method. This example returns a list of all the elements with classes equal to intro. So this is an example. Variable x is equal to document.query selector all p.intro. So what happens here it is this statement. The variable x is assigned with all the properties of paragraphs intro class. So paragraph intro class is having some CSS properties, having some text data. All these things should be assigned to variable x. The next method is finding HTML elements by HTML object collections. So this example finds the form element with ID is equal to form1 in the forms collection and displays all the element values. So here we can see the example, variable x is equal to document.forms of form1. So here what happens is the form1, all the data related to the form with ID form1 is assigned to variable x. Then variable text is equal to an empty string, variable I. For I is equal to 0, I less than x dot length, I plus plus, text plus is equal to x dot elements of I dot value br. So here what happens is, what all contents are inside the corresponding form tag, that value will be extracted and that value will be stored in text message. Then document.get element by id demo.inner HTML is equal to text. So here for the paragraph or for whatever the element it may be which is having the id demo, that elements inner content or inner data should be placed with the new text value. So text is actually having all the data related to the form components. So these two methods, finding HTML elements by CSS selectors and finding HTML elements by HTML object collections, are used for taking, or it is used for accessing the data from the different HTML elements. So we already studied about get elements by tag name, get elements by class name. The next method that we discussed is query selector all. Query selector all method selects all the data related to, it selects all the data related to a particular element, HTML element, or we can specify it using tag, HTML tag to its ID or its class name. Anything can be specified. Then another point is that finding HTML elements by HTML object collection. Here we use the method document.forms of the form name. Here what happens is all the data or all the input data from the form 1 will be assigned to the variable x, and from that variable x we are trying to access the different element values, and that value elements are appended to a text variable, and finally we are trying to place the data of that text in a component with id demo. Hope you understood these examples. Now we can see some of the HTML elements by HTML object collections. Document.anchors, document.body, document.document element, document.embeds, document.forms, document.head, document.images, document.links, document.scripts, document.title. All these methods are used for accessing the data from different HTML elements. See, in this we can see an example, and this is actually an example for animation in a particular web page. Before moving to the coding session, I will give you an idea about what we are going to do. Here you just see the screenshot. So this is a screenshot of the corresponding web page. Here is a button called click me button. You can see that click me button here. If you are pressing this click me button, what happens is you can see a red square here in the yellow background. So this yellow is a particular div area, and inside the yellow area there is a red square. So whenever a user clicks whenever user loaded this particular web page and clicks the click me button, what happens is this square is moved downward diagonally. That is the actual program. So whenever this click me button is clicked, this square will move downward. That is happening in the corresponding web page. So all the coding related to this particular animation are done in JavaScript. Now we can see the code. Hope you understood what is the context. We are pressing a particular button, one square will be moved diagonally towards the bottom layer. So we can see the example. An HTML tag is opened, then comes the head tag, then comes the style. The style is having some definitions. Hash container. So hash container is a style definition where width is specified, height is specified, position is specified, background color is specified. So here width is specified as 400 pixel, height is specified as 400 pixel, position is set as relative position, and background is set as yellow. So this is a style definition for the container. And for animate, now we can see another style definition. So here the thing is that animate, then width 50 pixel, height 50 pixel, position absolute, background color red. So these are some style definitions. So we, in the head part, we included two style specification, hash container and hash animate. Then comes the After the style definition, the head tag is closed. So this hash container and hash animate are ID selectors. Then after specifying the details related to container and animate, the style tag is closed and head tag is closed. Then comes the body of the corresponding web page. Then inside the body, a button, a paragraph is started. Then after that, a button is created using the button tag and its on-click function is specified. On-click is equal to my move, click me, slash button, slash p. So in the paragraph session, a button is created with text, click me, that is the text on the corresponding button. Whenever this particular button is clicked, on click event handler will handle that particular click. So on click is an event handler. So whenever this button is clicked, on click called the my move function. So this is about the button. Then after that, after the button, a div is created where ID is specified as container. So a division, a particular session will be created and its ID is mentioned as container. So we already defined container in the style session. Container is an ID selector. Now you can see the corresponding container. Container width is specified as 400 pixel, height is specified as 400 pixel and position is relative and its background is yellow. So 400 pixel width and 400 pixel height, yellow background division is created. Then after that, div id is equal to animate. Another div is opened. Inside this particular div, another div is opened with id animate. Now we can see the style definition for animate id selector. Inside the animate style selection or style definition, we can see that width is set as 50 pixel, height is set as 50 pixel, position is set as absolute, background color is set as red. So another division is created which is of 50 pixel width and 50 pixel height and its background color is red and it is absolute. Absolute means it will be related to the previous ancestor. Ancestor, it will be related to the ancestor elements. Its ancestor is div container. So what happens is inside this particular div area, a new div is created in red background. So now we can see the script section. Then the script tag is opened. Inside the script tag, it is defined the function myMove. So myMove is a function that will be called whenever this particular button is clicked. So inside the myMove function, we can see that variable element, a variable is created with name element. Document.get element by id animate. So by id we are trying to access the data in animate. So animate is the thing which is in the red color. Another variable is created, position is equal to 0. Variable id is equal to set interval frame comma 5. Set interval frame comma 5. So we are trying to create an interval in the corresponding frame of 5 minutes. Then we are trying to access the frame function. Frame is actually a function which is defined in the JavaScript. We can see what is inside the frame. Function frame. If position equal to 350. If position is equal to 350, clear interval id. So here what happens is if we are trying to increase the position and if the position value is reaches a particular value for 350, we have to clear the interval id. Otherwise, if the position is not equal to 350, we have to increase the position plus plus. Then after that, element dot style dot top is equal to position plus pixel. Element dot style dot element is actually containing the animate data. Then style dot top is equal to position plus is pixel, then element dot style dot left is equal to position plus pixel. So here what happens is, whenever this particular frame function is called, its position values. Its position value, initially it is 0, 0. 0 will specify that the idea is that 0 here it is the top left corner of the yellow div area, and whenever its position is incremented, in two ways, top wise as well as left wise. So here whenever a call towards the corresponding minimum function will occur, it will call the frame function, and in the frame function what happens is, position is incremented top wise and position is incremented left wise. So what happens actually is, this red division will move downwards diagonally. Now we get a feel like that. We are getting a feel that whenever we click that particular button, it will be moved diagonally. Then after the frame function, the corresponding function is closed. If else statement is closed, function is closed, frame function is closed, and my move function is closed. Then script is closed, body is closed, and HTML is closed. You have to try out this particular program, then only you get the idea about how it works. The next is reacting to events. A JavaScript can be executed when an event occurs, like when a user clicks on an HTML element. So whenever a user making a click on the corresponding HTML element, an event should occur. So at that time, the JavaScript code will be executed. To execute code when a user clicks on an element, our JavaScript code to an HTML event attribute onClick is equal to JavaScript. We already seen examples related to onClick event. So onClick, if you are using onClick in your program, whenever you are making a click on the corresponding HTML element, an event should be occurred. It will treat it. What the web browser should do is, it will treat it as a particular event, and the corresponding on-click event handler will handle that particular click event, so that the code which is related to on-click event will execute it. So the corresponding JavaScript will be automatically executed. Now we can see what are the HTML events that are related to on-click and some other events. When a user clicks the mouse, that can be defined using onClick function. When a web page has loaded, that can be defined using onLoad event handler. When an image has been loaded, here also we can specify the onLoad function. When the mouse moves over an element, its event can be handled using onMouseOver event. When an input field is changed, we can set an event handler. Then when an input form is submitted, we already mentioned about on submit, on click, on focus. Then when your user starts a query, then whenever a change occurs on a particular web page, we can generate the corresponding HTML elements. Whenever HTML generates an events, that should be handled by the JavaScript. Here there is a simple example. Here doc type HTML, the body of the corresponding HTML contains a header only. H1 on click is equal to this dot inner HTML is equal to click on this text, that is H1. So initially whenever the corresponding page is loaded, it contains a simple heading, click on this text. So whenever users make a click on that particular text value, its text content will be changed and its content will be clicked. So if you are clicking this particular text, it will generate a particular event, so that the corresponding on-click event handler will handle that situation, and it will change the content in H1 to clicked. Now we can see some of the HTML DOM event listener methods. So the method which is used for adding event listeners is add event listener method. Add an event listener that fires when a user clicks a particular button. How we can add the corresponding listener method to our corresponding event. That can be done using, here there is an example, document dot get element by id my button dot add event listener click display date. So here what happens is my button is the id of element. My button is the id of element. For that my button we are trying to add an event listener which contains the value click. Whenever it is clicked, it will display the date. The add event listener method attaches an event handler to the specified element. The add event listener method attaches an event handler to an element without overwriting the existing event handlers. So here what happens is this add event listener make an event handler attached to the corresponding element, HTML element, and this particular event handler did not make any overwriting to the existing event handlers. You can add many event handlers to one element. For a single button, you can add on click, on double click, on submit, likewise. So you may add many event handlers to the same type to one element, that is click events, that is two click events. One on click and on double click can be specified, that can be treated as two separate events. You can add event listeners to any DOM object, not only HTML elements, that is the window object. We can also set event listeners to window objects. The add event listener method makes it easier to control how the event reacts to bubbling. We will see what is bubbling in the coming sessions. When using the add event listener method, the JavaScript is separated from the HTML markup for better readability and allows you to add event listeners even when you do not control the HTML markup. You can easily remove an event listener by using the remove event listener method. So in order to add an event listener to our HTML component, we can use add event listener method. At the same time, if you want to remove an event listener from a particular HTML element, we can use remove event listener method. That thing we have to remember. Then another point is that we can add any number of event listeners to an existing DOM object. To an existing HTML element, we can add any number of event listeners. We can specify on click event, on double click event. So in order to add new listeners, you just use the function add event listener function. Then another point we have to remember that in case of in addition to the HTML elements, we can set event listeners to the windows also. So this is the general syntax for adding the event listener element. What should be the name of the corresponding element? Dot add event listener of what should be the event, what should be the function called. Then we have to use capture. So the first parameter for this add event listener method is the type of the event. Whether it is click, whether it is mouse down, whether it is mouse over, double click, like that. That should be specified as the first parameter. The second parameter is the function we want to call when an event occurs. So this is the function that should be occurred whenever this event is happened. The third parameter is a Boolean value specifying whether to use event bubbling or event capturing. So this is an optional thing, and we will see in the next slides what is event bubbling and event capturing, and this parameter is an optional one. Add an event handler to an element. This is an example. Alert hello method when the user clicks on an element. So if a HTML element is there and whenever a particular user clicks on that particular element, it should generate an alert box. So for that the code is like this: element. You have to specify what should be the name of the element. Element dot add event listener. You have to specify the method add event listener. The function is event should be generated as click. Whenever that click happen, this function will be called, and inside this particular function it contains a single statement alert of hello world. So whenever the user clicks on the corresponding HTML element, an alert box will be generated with message hello world. You can also refer to an external named function. If you can specify function like this, or you can create externally this particular function by a function name. So this is an example which refers to an external function. The same example, hello alert hello world when the user clicks on an element. Here it is specified, the function is specified in line. Here it is defined externally. Here you can have a look at this. Element dot add event listener of click my function. So what happens is whenever the user makes a click on the corresponding element, my function will call. This is the definition of my function. Inside the my function, it will create an alert box with text message hello world. Hope you understood. Then we can see how we can add many event handlers to the same element. I already told you that we can add multiple event listeners to a single HTML element. For that, here we are having an example. The add event listener method allows you to add many events to the same element without overwriting existing events. So here we can see that element dot add event listener of click my function. That is the first event listener method. Then second is element dot add event listener of click my second function. So whenever the user make a click on the corresponding element, my function will be called. Whenever it is clicked, the my second function will also be called. You can add events to different types to the same element. You can add events of different types to the same element. Here you can see that element dot add event listener of mice over my function. Element dot add event listener of click my second function. Element dot add event listener of mouse out my third function. And add an event handler to the window object. Sorry. So here in this three lines, for the same HTML element, we are trying to add three types of events. First event is happened whenever a mouse is moved over that particular element, my function will be involved. Whenever a click happens on the corresponding element, my second function will involved. Whenever the mouse move out of the corresponding element, my third function will involve. So all these events are specified on the single HTML element. Now we can see how we can add event handler to the window object. The add event listener method allows you to add event listeners on any HTML DOM object such as HTML elements, the HTML document, the window object, or other objects that support events like the XML HTTP request object. So if we want to add event handlers to the window object, what we have to do is we have to add event listener method, which allows you to add event listeners to any of the HTML DOM objects such as HTML elements, HTML document, window object, or any other object that supports events like XML HTTP request object. For all this, whatever things that we can treat it as objects, for that object we can add the corresponding event listeners. So here there is an example which is related to window object. Add an event listener that fires when a user resizes the window. And we can see that window.add event listener of resize comma function document.get element by id demo.inner html is equal to some text. So whenever the user is making a change on the corresponding window size buttons, it will generate some text in the corresponding ID, the demo ID, which is specified in the corresponding HTML page. Now we can see how we can pass parameters. Passing parameters. When passing parameter values, use an anonymous function that calls a specified function with the parameters. Now we can see the example element.add event listener. Click function my function of p1 comma p2. So here what happens is, element.add event listener. Click function my function of p1 comma p2. Here this function is, we are adding an event listener to the HTML component element, and the function that we are going to define is on the click event. This particular function will work. Actually this function is not having any function name, but inside the anonymous function we specified as a call towards my function with parameters p1 and p2. So likewise also we can pass parameters using anonymous function. Anonymous functions are those functions which are not defined with a particular name. Simply call the function on the line itself. Now we can see the contest event bubbling and event capturing. What thing we have to use for the event while we are adding event listeners, what type of parameter? I already mentioned that the first argument is the for add event listener method. The first argument is event name. Then second is the corresponding function that should be invoked whenever that particular event occurs. And third parameter is an optional which specifies whether it is bubbling or capturing. So here the third parameter, it will be related to event bubbling or event capturing. There are two ways of event propagation in the corresponding HTML DOM: bubbling and capturing. Event propagation is a way of defining the element order when an event occurs. So it is a propagation method, means it's a way of defining the element order when an event occurs. Here the example is, when you have a p element inside a div element and the user clicks on the p element, which element this event should be handled first? So that is our question. So the idea is that whenever we are having a div, inside the div we are having a p tag. So whenever user clicks the p element, the elements p element on click function will work first, or div on click function will work first. That is the agenda behind this event propagation. So if you are setting it in bubbling, we can set for that event propagation in two ways, either bubbling or in capturing. We will see what is in bubbling. In bubbling, what happens is the innermost elements event is handled first and then the outer. So whenever this p element div is the outer element, inside the div we are having a p. So whenever I click towards p happens, the p's event handler will invoke first, then comes the div. That is the case of bubbling. So in the example, in bubbling, the innermost elements event is handled first and then the outer. So the p elements click event is handled first, then the div elements click event. That is the context of bubbling. And in capturing, the outermost elements event is handled first and then the inner. Just opposite as that of bubbling. So if you are making a click in the, we are having the same situation, we are having a div. Inside the div we are having a p, and the click is happened on P. So if we are specifying it as capturing method, the div elements click event will be handled first, then only the P elements click event. For bubbling, inner is having higher priority, and in capturing, outer is having the higher priority. That is the basic idea. Hope you understood what is event bubbling and event capturing. So remember, event propagation means it is a way of defining the order in which event handler should work. So in bubbling means bubbling giving importance to inner element. So the event handler of inner element will work first, then only the outer element. In case of capturing, the outer events or outer components, event handler will first work first, then only the inner elements event handling function. Some more methods. We already discussed the add event listener and remove event listener. With the add event listener method, you can specify the propagation type using the use capture parameter. So this is the example: add event listener, event, function, use capture. The default value is false, which will be using the bubbling propagation. When the value is set to true, the event uses the capturing propagation. By default, all the event listeners will work in the bubbling method, that is giving priority to inner elements. So if you set the third parameter as true, it will move like capturing method, that is outer is having the higher priority. Here document.get element by id my p dot add event listener of click my function comma true. So here what happens is it will give priority to outer element. So here document.get element by id my div dot add event listener of click my function true. Here also it will give priority to outer element. In order to remove event listener, we have to use the remove event listener method, and this method removes event handlers that have been attached to the add event listener method. So in order to remove the event listener methods, you simply specify element name dot remove event listener, then on what event that particular listener attached, that will be specified, and would function. Okay. In the down session, I already mentioned that HTML creates, whenever browser loaded a particular web page, HTML creates a tree of objects for that corresponding web page, for that corresponding HTML document. Now we can see how this tree of object will be treated. What all things are considered in the tree. So this is a simple HTML page. HTML tag is there, head tag is there, title tag is there, which contains a text, DOM tutorial, then head is closed, then body session. Inside the body, one header element is there, one paragraph element is there, body is closed and HTML is closed. Now we are trying to construct how the web browser constructs the DOM model. For this simple web page, the node tree is created like this. From the HTML above you read, HTML is set as the root node. So HTML has no parents, so it will be treated as a root node. Then it considers HTML is the parent of head and body, because inside the HTML, first tag opened is head, then head tag is closed, then comes a body tag is closed, then HTML is closed. So HTML is the parent of head and body. Then head is the first child of HTML and body is the last child of HTML. Now, so what we construct is, we construct HTML as the root node. The left child is head tag, right child is body. Only two children are there. Then we move on to the left side. Head has one child, title. Again, this head is having a child called title, and title has one child with a text node DOM tutorial. So the left child of HTML is having head. Again, head is having another child, title is having another child, which text value DOM tutorial. Then body has two children, H1 and P. H1 has one child, that is Dom lesson 1, and P has one child, Hello World. And H1 and P are the corresponding siblings. Because inside the body itself, these two tags are specified, H1 and P. Now we can see the node relationships. The nodes in the node tree have a hierarchical relationship to each other because there is a root node, left child, right child, subchilds, like this. The terms parent, child, and sibling are used to describe the relationship. In a node tree, the top node is termed as the root node. Every node has exactly one parent except the root, which has no parent. And a node can have a number of children. Siblings are the nodes of the same parent. This is the basic idea regarding a tree. Likewise, for every HTML document, we have to create a node tree. Not only the user creates, the browser itself creates a tree of objects, and that tree of objects will be termed as document object model. Hope you understood the things related to document object model and the various events which will be various functions that will be related to DOM. Thank you.